The crown felt heavier at night, not because of gold, but because silence pressed against his skull when the city slept. In those hours before dawn, when even the gods seemed to look away, Gilgamesh lay awake and wondered, without daring to name it, what waits when strength finally fails. If you choose to walk this road with me, slowly, into shadow and stone, stay close. Some stories are not meant to be rushed. They reveal themselves only to those willing to listen in the dark. By day, Gilgamesh was everything a king should be. His voice carried across courtyards like a command carved into air. His footsteps echoed along the walls of Uruk, those vast ribs of stone meant to hold back chaos itself. People bowed low as he passed, not always from love, often from instinct. He was taller, stronger, sharper than any man born of woman alone. 2/3 divine, the priests whispered, touched by the gods, chosen. And yet, when the crowds dispersed and the incense burned down to ash, something unsettled moved beneath his skin. It began with dreams, not visions of conquest or feasting halls, but of falling. Endless falling through a dark without ground or sky. Sometimes he dreamed of standing alone on the city walls while the river below dried into dust. Sometimes of a shadow that waited patiently, never advancing, never retreating, only watching. He would wake with his heart racing, breath torn from his chest, his hands clutching the bed as if it were the edge of the world. At first, he dismissed it. Kings do not confess weakness, even to themselves. Dreams were smoke. Omens could be bent with ritual, drowned with offerings. He ordered sacrifices doubled. He summoned diviners and demanded answers. They spoke carefully, their words wrapped in reverence and fear, telling him only what would not anger him. But the dreams returned. During the day, death brushed past him more often than before. A laborer crushed beneath a stone block. A soldier coughing blood into the dust after a skirmish at the border. An old woman slumped beside the market road, eyes clouded, breath gone. These were common sights in any city, but now Gilgamesh noticed the stillness that followed, the way bodies cooled, the way names vanished from conversation within days. He began to linger too long at funerals. The smoke of burning offerings no longer smelled sweet. It clung to his throat. The priest spoke of the underworld with practiced calm, describing a realm of dust and silence where kings and beggars alike drank from cracked bowls. Gilgamesh found his jaw tightening as they spoke, his nails biting into his palms. That place was for others. It could not be for him. He had built Uruk to defy time itself. The walls were thick enough for chariots to race atop them. Each brick was stamped with his name, pressed into clay so that even centuries hence, the world would remember who commanded stone to rise from earth. When he walked those walls at sunset, watching light bleed into the plains, he told himself this was permanence. Yet even stone erodes. One evening, as the sky burned red and violet, a falcon struck the wall near him, its neck broken mid-flight. It lay twisted at his feet, wings still trembling. Gilgamesh stared down at it longer than his guards found comfortable. Life, fleeing so suddenly. Strength, wasted in an instant. That night, he could not sleep at all. He rose before dawn and wandered the palace corridors barefoot, the cold floor biting into his soles. Torches flickered, stretching his shadow into something monstrous along the walls. For the first time, the palace felt unfamiliar, as if it belonged to someone else, someone already gone. In a quiet chamber, lined with offerings to the gods, He stopped before a polished bronze mirror. He studied his own reflection. The unscarred skin, the hard eyes, the face sung into legend by poets still alive. He looked eternal. But mirrors lie. They show only what breathes. A question surfaced then, sharp and unwelcome. What will remain when this face is dust? Anger followed quickly, as it always did. Anger at weakness, at uncertainty, at the insolence of the thought itself. He struck the mirror with his fist. Bronze rang out like a bell. The surface dented, warping his reflection into something distorted, almost afraid. The gods had given him strength beyond men, wisdom, dominion. Why then this gnawing dread? Why now? By morning, his decision was already forming, though he would not speak it aloud yet. He summoned messengers, ordered tablets brought from distant temples, demanded stories older than the walls themselves. He questioned travelers who had crossed deserts where maps ended. He listened for whispers of men who had cheated death, of names spoken only in fragments. Somewhere, he believed, there had to be an answer. Because if death could claim him, if time would one day reach even his towering shadow, then all his victories were temporary. All his walls, gestures, all his songs, echoes fading into nothing. And Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, breaker of enemies, would not accept a universe where his end was silence. As the sun rose and the city stirred to life, he stood on the highest wall and looked beyond the horizon. Not with the hunger of a conqueror, but with the gaze of a man who had glimpsed an enemy without a face. Soon, he would leave these walls behind. Soon, he would chase eternity itself. And though he did not yet know it, this was the moment his reign truly began to end. The road did not recognize him as king. Beyond the last gate of Uruk, the land opened into silence. Flat plains scorched by sun, broken by thorn and stone. No banners followed him. No drums announced his passing. Dust rose beneath his feet like a quiet accusation. For the first time since childhood, Gilgamesh walked without witnesses, and the world did not bend. At first, he carried his purpose like armor. Each step was driven by certainty. Somewhere ahead, beyond desert and mountain, lived the secret that undid death. He repeated it to himself as heat shimmered on the horizon. He told it to the stars when night fell and sleep refused him. Purpose became his breath. Without it, fear crept too close. Days blurred into each other. His body, once tireless, learned exhaustion. His muscles ached. His throat cracked with thirst. When he reached scattered villages, people stared at him with wary eyes, not in awe, but confusion. They saw only a tall stranger, dust-stained, asking dangerous questions. Is there a man who cannot die? Have you heard of one who outlived his sons? Where does time lose its hold? Some laughed nervously. Others turned away. A few spoke in hushed voices of a figure older than floods, a survivor of a world once drowned. They pointed east, then farther still, always farther. The answer remained just beyond reach, as if the land itself conspired to stretch the distance. At night, Gilgamesh dreamed less, but when he did, the dreams were worse. No falling now. Instead, he stood still while everything around him aged. Trees withered, Stones cracked. Faces blurred into skulls. He remained unchanged at the center, watching centuries collapse like wet clay. He woke with a cry lodged in his chest, unsure whether he feared dying or being left behind. The farther he traveled, the less kingly he felt. His voice lost command. His name carried no weight. He traded ornaments for water, pride for passage. Hunger made him irritable, then quiet. He began to understand what it meant to be merely human, not as an idea, but as a condition. One evening, he reached a desolate shore where the sea lay black and unmoving, as if it had grown tired of motion. An old man waited there, thin as driftwood, eyes reflecting more years than Gilgamesh could imagine. They spoke beside a small fire, its light trembling against the dark. "You seek what cannot be kept," the old man said softly, without judgment. "I seek what should not be taken," Gilgamesh replied. The old man smiled, a weary expression. "Even the gods do not hold what you want. Why should you?" The words struck deeper than insult. They followed Gilgamesh long after he left the shore, echoing with each footstep. Why should you? Because he was different, he wanted to answer. Because he was chosen. Because fear had made a demand, and he had listened. The land grew harsher. Mountains rose like broken teeth, cutting the sky. Paths narrowed, forcing him to climb, where one misstep meant disappearance. His hands bled. His breath came ragged. More than once he considered turning back, not from courage lost, but from doubt. What if the search itself was the punishment? What if immortality was a story, invented to keep men walking forward when they should stop? At the edge of the world, where maps dissolved into rumor, he found the one who had endured. The survivor did not look eternal. His back was bent, his hair thin and pale. His eyes carried a sadness deeper than age. Around him lay a garden, green, impossibly alive, fed by waters that shimmered with quiet power. They spoke as night settled. "I was spared," the old one said. "Not rewarded. There is a difference." Gilgamesh listened, fists clenched. "I will take either." The survivor told him of the flood, of gods who erased the world and then regretted their own fury. Of being chosen, not for greatness, but obedience. Immortality, he explained, was not triumph, it was aftermath. Watching generations rise and rot, while memory outlived love. Still, he offered Gilgamesh a chance, not eternal life itself, but proof it could be touched. Beneath the waters slept a plant that renewed youth. Not forever, but enough to taste victory. Enough to believe. Gilgamesh plunged into the depths without hesitation. Cold crushed his lungs. Darkness pressed in. His hands closed around something living, pulsing faintly, as if time itself breathed through it. When he surfaced, gasping, the plant lay in his grip. Fragile, real. For the first time since leaving Uruk, hope overwhelmed fear. He did not shout. He did not pray. He simply stared at it, trembling, not from cold, but from proximity. Death had stepped back. Time had blinked. On the return journey, exhaustion caught him unguarded. Near an oasis, he laid the plant beside him and entered the water to wash away weeks of dust and blood. The pool was still, silent. When he returned, The ground was empty. A serpent slid away into the reeds, skin gleaming new, leaving behind only tracks and silence. Gilgamesh stood, unmoving. No scream came, no curse. The loss was too precise, too clean. The universe had not fought him. It had simply taken advantage of a moment's trust. He sank to his knees, hands pressed into the sand, and laughed once. A short, broken sound that startled even him. All that distance, all that suffering, and eternity had slipped away while he washed his hands. As dawn broke, Gilgamesh rose and turned back toward Uruk. The road home stretched long and unforgiving, and for the first time, he walked it knowing there was no escape from time, only the question of what he would carry back with him. The gates of Uruk rose from the horizon like a memory made solid. Stone by stone, the city returned to him, not as conquest, but as witness. The walls he had ordered built still held their shape against wind and sun. The river still curved beside them, patient, indifferent. Life continued in familiar rhythms, merchants calling, children running, priests murmuring to gods who had never answered him. Gilgamesh entered without ceremony. There were no trumpets, no crowds surged forward. A few guards recognized him too late and dropped to their knees, startled by how thin he looked, how quiet. He waved them away. The gestures of power felt foreign now, like a language he had not spoken in years. Inside the city, everything seemed smaller. Not diminished, simply finite. Streets ended, buildings aged, faces he half remembered carried new lines, new griefs, new joys that had unfolded without him. Time had not paused for his absence. It never had. He walked the length of the walls at dusk, alone. The stones bore his name, pressed deep into their surfaces, but the letters were already softening at the edges. Wind and dust had begun their work. Not destruction, erosion, the slow patience of the world. For the first time, that patience did not enrage him. He rested his palm against the wall and closed his eyes. He remembered why he had built it, not only to defend Uruk, but to leave proof that he had been here, that his strength had shaped something that could be touched, climbed, repaired, something that would outlast breath, even if it did not outlast time itself. Night settled. Stars emerged, indifferent and cold. Once he had looked up at them with defiance, daring them to acknowledge him. Now he studied them quietly. They had burned before his birth. They would burn after his name fell from memory. Their light did not mock him anymore. It simply was. In the days that followed, Gilgamesh ruled differently. He listened longer. He spoke less. When disputes were brought before him, he no longer crushed them with certainty. He weighed them. When priests praised him as divine, he did not correct them, but he did not believe them either. Divinity, he had learned, was not immunity. At night, the dreams returned, but they had changed. No more falling, no more shadows waiting at the edge of sight. Instead, he dreamed of hands shaping clay, of voices singing names so they would not be forgotten, of walls rising slowly under the sun. He dreamed of Enkidu, laughing, alive, then fading like smoke, not in terror, but in quiet acceptance. Death no longer stood as an enemy at the end of a road. It walked beside him. He understood now that immortality had never been stolen from him. It had never been offered. The gods had not denied him out of cruelty, nor tested him for sport. They had simply revealed a truth he could not see from a throne: that endless life empties meaning, and that limits carve significance into action. What endures is not the body, but the trace it leaves on others. One evening, as the city slept, Gilgamesh returned to the mirror he had once shattered. The bronze had been repaired, polished smooth again. He looked into it and saw the same face, strong, unbroken, but behind the eyes lived something new. Not fear, not arrogance, awareness. He would die. The king of Uruk would one day be laid into the earth like any other man. His breath would still. His hands would cool. Time would claim him as it claims all things. And yet, the walls would remain for a while. Stories would outlive stone. Names would be spoken, distorted, exaggerated, argued over. Children not yet born would hear of a king who challenged death and returned wiser, not victorious. Perhaps that was enough. Gilgamesh turned from the mirror and stepped into the night air. Somewhere beyond the walls, a jackal cried. Life continued, fragile and relentless. He no longer asked how to escape the end. He asked what was worth building before it arrived. And in that question, in its weight, its humility, lay the only immortality a human can ever touch. To accept time, to act anyway, and to leave behind something that proves, briefly, unmistakably, that we were here.